Well, I would start by saying we've agreed on 4 principles that I think are important. The first is that we're going to appoint our teams respectively that have worked very quickly to reestablish the functionality of our respective missions in Washington and in Moscow. For us to be able to continue to move down this road, we need to have diplomatic facilities that are operating and functioning normally. The second point is that we're going to appoint a high-level team from our end to help negotiate and work through the end of the conflict in Ukraine in a way that's enduring and acceptable to all the parties engaged. The third point is to begin to work at a high level as well to begin to discuss and think about and examine both the geopolitical and economic cooperation that could result from an end to the conflict in Ukraine. Obviously, we'd have to see that conflict come to a successful and enduring end in order for that to be possible. And the last thing we agreed to is that while our teams are going to be working on all of this, the 4 of us who were here today, the 5 of us that were here today, are going to remain engaged in this process to make sure that it's moving along in a productive way. The first next step is working through our respective teams at the diplomatic side just to ensure that our diplomatic missions can function. There's been a series of reciprocal actions taken over the last 10 years that have really diminished our ability to operate in Moscow, as an example, and they would argue their ability to operate in Washington. We're going to need to have vibrant diplomatic missions that are able to function normally in order to be able to continue these conduits. The second is a high-level team, including those who are experts on these topics, the technical side, to begin to engage with their side on parameters of what an end to this conflict would look like. And on that front, obviously, there's going to be engagement and consultation with Ukraine, with our partners in Europe and others. But ultimately, the Russian side will be indispensable to this effort, and so that process will begin. And then the third is, together with those other 2, is beginning to engage in identifying the extraordinary opportunities that exist should this conflict come to a acceptable end, the credible opportunities that exist to partner with the Russians geopolitically on issues of common interest, and frankly economically on issues that hopefully will be good for the world and will also improve our relations in the long term between these 2 important countries. I came away today convinced that they are willing to begin to engage in a serious process to determine how and how quickly and through what mechanism can an end be brought to this war. Whether we can ultimately reach that outcome will obviously depend on every side in this conflict's willingness to agree to certain things. So I think it's important to have this meeting because we haven't really had much engagement with the Russians for almost 3 years. And it sets the table for future conversations. How that turns out will be up to the parties and their willingness not just to make commitments but to live by them. That'll be tested in the weeks to come. But I can tell you again, as I reiterate, President Trump has made it very clear during the campaign he thought this conflict needed to end. He's the only leader in the world that could have started a process that we saw here today, and this process is going to continue.
Well, there are some underlying principles. This needs to be a permanent end to the war and not a temporary end as we've seen in the past. We know just the practical reality is that there is going to be some discussion of territory and there's going to be discussion of security guarantees. Those are just fundamental basics that will undergird and underlie any type of discussion. But I think the most important part is the President has stated his desire, his determination to end this war, to end the killing that is going on, the death and destruction that is happening as this war goes on and on, month after month after month, in the killing fields of eastern and southern Ukraine is unacceptable. It is not in the interest of either country. It's not in the interest of the world, and certainly not in the interest of the United States and Europe. So all of those things will drive the negotiations going forward. And as you can see, President Trump is determined to move very quickly. We just had a head of state phone call, the first in years, and here we are less than a week later at the highest level of the U.S. and Russian government, and we expect to continue to drive that pace to not only end the war, but then to unlock what could be very productive and stabilizing relationships going forward. Look, this is a common effort. This isn't just about what the United States is going to continue to contribute. and what we are going to continue to ask of the American taxpayer, we all have to make those tough decisions. We all have to contribute to our common defense, and we expect that this to be a two-way street for our European allies. And the fact that both the United Kingdom, France, and others are talking about contributing more forcefully to Ukraine's security, we think is a good thing.
It was positive, upbeat, constructive. Everybody there to get to the right outcome, solution-based. We discussed it afterwards. We couldn't have imagined a better result after this session. It was very, very solid.